invitation. That was just what I needed. And Brad, I appreciate the introduction, and Dara for bringing me here. And I am just switching my view so that I can see as many of you as possible. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up, yeah? Okay. I saw many of you, what hobbies you're doing right now, and people are gardening and reading. And I saw from Janet that today would have been her mother's, I think, 96th birthday or 93rd, acknowledging what brings everyone here today in this space of Reimagine, which is about grief. And in the course of my own development in this work and in this space, I've come to recognize grief in terms of the big G grief that comes with loss or illness, divorce, and also small G grief that comes with the everyday experiences that can affect us and rattle us. And we sort of weave through various forms of small G griefs and big G griefs in our days and in our lives. So whatever kind of grief brings you here, welcome. I was asked to do just a small brief exercise with you all, and then there will be some questions that come up with prompts to have some more deeper conversations with each other, which I think is hopefully why you're really here. So I'll set up this exercise by saying that it's kind of funny to call me some like empathy guru or anything, because I started this work as somebody who really struggled with what to do or say to a friend of mine that was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I knew enough to know that my reluctance to reach out to her was not based on good judgment. I wasn't thinking, I'm sure she would appreciate discretion, but rather I was just afraid. I was afraid that reaching out to her would make her uncomfortable and then make me really uncomfortable, and that I would fail in my capacity as a friend. And so I did what I thought was the safest thing and did nothing at all. And of course, as we all know who've experienced our forms of big G grief, and how people respond to it rearranges your address book. And I was not top in her address book by not reaching out to her when she had breast cancer. And I realized that was the case, but it didn't stop me from knowing what to do or say. So I did a lot of research about how to connect with others with practical suggestions, because that's what I needed. That's where I was at the time. And then I caught on to this idea of empathy, which isn't necessarily practical so much as a mindset, something that we bring in our manner of presence to somebody else. And that can be a very difficult thing to explain in a list of bullets. But as I've attended more and more and workshops and readings, and experiences with you all, I feel so much deeper in my experience with empathy myself. So Teresa, I'll just comment too. You mentioned how mindfulness can impact empathy. The exercise that I want to bring forward to you today is something that has really helped me to cultivate empathy, and I will be touching for a moment on mindfulness as well. So in my workshops that I give, I ask people, what got in the way of you connecting to somebody else in a difficult time? And very often they come up with things like, I didn't have time, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what it was like. I didn't know if I could understand their experience because I had never had that experience before. So say, for example, if you've been through a divorce and you know somebody who's going through a divorce, you automatically have some instinctive feeling that that might be hard, right? You go in your mind, you start cataloging the things that that person might be going through. Doesn't mean that they are, but you certainly lean in to some sense of it. But if you've never gone through that experience before, it may completely miss your radar how difficult divorce can be. This is, of course, the same if you've gone through a particular kind of illness. if you've gone through a particular kind of loss, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a child, maybe the loss of somebody whose relationship is very ambivalent and you don't know how to feel about this circumstance. So there are moments in our lives where we can instinctively feel for somebody else, and that's when we can feel safest to reach out. Where we feel least likely, least safe to reach out is when somebody's had an experience that we've never had before. How do we know what it's like to lose a spouse if we've never lost a spouse? And this is really plaguing for young people who typically, and not always, have fewer life experiences to draw upon. So an exercise that has helped me to figure out what somebody else might be going through when I haven't had that experience is first to imagine empathy on some kind of continuum, okay? And on one side is what you would call affective empathy. This is the empathy that we emotionally feel towards somebody else. This is a highly instinctive form of resonance with someone else. Can you all relate to a time where you just felt for somebody else's experience? This is one side. On the other side of the continuum is cognitive empathy, where you really just have to think about what this person might be experiencing. And sometimes that's a frustrating cognitive leap. And those of us with some maturity have recognized we have to do that when we're in a conflict with somebody. Like, I'm not feeling for you right now, I'm feeling for me, but I need to step back and really imagine what might be going through your mind and heart right now to have that opinion, that position, to talk to me that way. So affective empathy is something we instinctively feel. Cognitive empathy, also called perspective taking, is something where it's a lot of distance and we really have to do some cognitive backflips to get there. This continuum can go awry. If you're very far on the affective end, then you're not just experiencing affective empathy, you're actually experiencing empathic distress. Has anyone had that experience here? Right? Okay, I see you, Laura, where somebody's going through an experience that just triggers you and you feel immobilized and you feel helpless. And you either lunge towards that situation or you back away from that situation, but you are not feeling centered around that person's experience because it is triggering so much emotion in you. That is called empathic distress. Teresa, you mentioned that mindfulness can help cultivate empathy. When we are in experience of empathic distress, we are no longer mindful. We are just reacting. And that experience of empathic distress is not experienced by those around us as empathy. It's experienced as foisting, fretting, fleeing, anxiety, right? So that's the kind of help that people run away from. So recognizing that affective empathy is very valuable because we can all appreciate somebody recognizing our experience just with their own sense of it. Empathic distress is not where we want to be, and being mindful of when we are in fact triggered is really important. On the other end, perspective-taking empathy. Wonderful to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. But it can veer so far that you wind up analyzing a person. You wind up asking a lot of fact-finding questions and making somebody feel pinned to a wall and not actually in it with you. And you start seeming superior and aloof rather than in it, one-on-one. So we all want a little bit of affective empathy and a little bit of cognitive empathy, but their extremes can be dangerous. So just noticing when we might be veering on one of those extremes. Again, imagining this continuum. Compassion then is what many will say is a mix of affective empathy and cognitive empathy. Because You don't want to be in empathic distress. You're so immobilized that you actually can't be of good help to that person. You don't want to be so far to the right of that continuum that you may have figured it out, but the person doesn't even feel you care. Compassion is affective empathy that gives you the motivation to act and to sacrifice some modicum of your time or energy to act, but to do it with this person's needs in mind and not just your own impulsive, reactive response to a situation. So, going back to this idea of what do we do when we don't know what somebody is experiencing in their difficult time. When I first wrote my book, I'm going to plug it. There's no good card for this. When I first wrote this book, I imagined that experience with illness was very different from experience with grief, with experience from infertility, miscarriage, divorce. And one of my very wise readers who read my chapter dedicated to each issue said, you know, you're really repeating yourself a lot. And I realized that because underlying so many of our highly unique experiences with grief, each loss is unique, each miscarriage is unique, each divorce is unique. Underlying that are some common human fundamentals of suffering. And that is where I want us to be in touch with today. It's both taking perspective and feeling for somebody else. So this is the exercise. I'm going to give you 3 different prompts. And if you have a pen and paper, it will help you to write down your response to those prompts. I want you to conjure up a time when you went through something really difficult. It can be your defining wound, and it doesn't have to be loss. I want to give you that permission that loss doesn't have to be your defining wound. It can be a loss, something that really shattered you. I'm going to give you a moment to come up with that. And it may have shattered you, and it may have put you in a state of just transition into something else. So recognizing that being broken can also mean coming into something new. But that in-between space, that moment. Now, I want you to reflect on the following. First, and I'll give you some time to think about it, how did it affect your sense of identity? How did this event and everything that surrounded it affected your sense of who you are, your identity, your core identity? And now, I want you to think about how this event affected your sense of community, your sense of belonging. Did this event have an effect on your financial security? On any sense of security? Security of where you might live? Security around who you would be interacting with every day? And now, if you could give a moment to think about what could someone do for you, or maybe someone did do for you, to alleviate that sense of fear that comes with a change in identity. What did somebody do? Small gesture, a big gesture, could be a family member, could be a colleague, could be anything. What did that person do to alleviate that fear and a shift in identity? What did somebody do to enhance your sense of belonging when you felt you didn't belong? Enhance your sense of community when you felt you had no community. And what did someone do to enhance your sense of security? Whether it was who you could rely on regularly, financial security, security with where you were going to live, some small dose of security that they provided you. This is the thing about human suffering, is that underlying all of our unique experiences are incredibly hard shifts in our sense of identity, in our sense of community, in our sense of security. And even if we don't understand technically, deeply, what someone else might be going through, if, for example, they're experiencing infertility, you might step back and ask yourself, how might this change their experience of community? Just think of that for a moment. How might this change their sense of identity? How might this be impacting them financially? Any difficult time, we can draw upon these questions to start connecting with somebody human to human. My line is around this: you may not be a member of the Widows Club, but you are a member of the frail and messy human club. And when all we can do is say, I am sorry, but we say it messed up human to messed up human, that is empathy. When we say it as if that would never happen to me, I am so sorry you are going through something so horrible, that is pity. So when you go into the space with somebody else, not because what you know about their experience, but what you know about the human experience, that is a moment of empathy.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you so much for elucidating this for us today. And I'm excited for the ways that this is coming up in the conversations that you've had us think through right now. Definitely have some things in my own mind, and it's going to lead directly into the questions that we're going to grapple with as a group. So let me get to those, but thank you truly again. And also to say that big shout out to Dara for connecting you with us. Dara and you did a bunch of work together in the past on some of your material, and just grateful for that connection. So now we're going to move.
So thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Dara.
Yeah. So if everyone wants to share in the chat, again, what you're taking from this conversation, that would be fabulous to share with Kelsey. So we're about to move into our breakout rooms. I would love to share with you very briefly how that works, but most of you know. And in fact, today, if you've been here before and you do know how it works, I'm going to say go for it and lead the group so we can zip past this. If you have a problem, connect to us at hello@letsreimagine.org. But the most important parts are to keep the conversations confidential, to share your story and don't offer unsolicited advice. You always have the right to pass, and keep responses to 3 minutes. And I also want to please mention today, when you get into the rooms, make sure that you turn on your microphone or off your mute button, and then also turn on your video so we can see you and hear you as you're in these groups. So what are the questions today? You're going to share your name and location, and then there's 3 really great questions. When is a time when you shied away from someone you care about, and why do you think you shied away? And Kelsey, did you have a little bit more color to this question that you wanted to add?
Only that there are people who we are practicing setting sort of boundaries with, and there's a lot around that topic. This is more about people who you really wish you had connected with and regret that you didn't.
Okay, great. So a time you shied away from someone you care about and why you think you shied away from them. Think of a time when someone let you down in your time of need. What do you think could have been going on for them? And then finally, how do you think resilience and maintaining balance could be fostered by empathy for others? So we're going to copy those questions and we're going to put them in the chat so you can refer to them. And then we're going to have a couple of minutes to chat with this group, and we're going to come back here for a final goodbye. Thank you so much. And Dara's going to push the magic button and whisk us away to the corners of the internet where we'll be with our digital neighbors.